Whew. A bit too big, ain't it? Can you get out of the way, please? Thank you. Hello everyone, I'm Carius, and this is my favorite blaster that I've made in a while, for several reasons, but you've already seen this before, or at least a previous iteration of it, and today's video is going to be about the changes and iterations I've made to this to make it a much more reliable, functional blaster. So this thing's gone through a lot of revisions. Basically, I've taken it to probably a dozen Nerf wars at this point and broken it in a new way at every single one. And today I've just come back from an SCNC war where I used it half the day and nothing broke, and it was fantastic, and it worked very smoothly the whole time, and I think I'm fairly confident that I've fixed everything that could be a problem on this blaster for now. So I wanted to go through all the different changes and kind of just document what we've got going here. I believe the first change, and one that's already kind of showed up in a video with the solvent welding, was gluing up this little area where the Seers connect to the handle, because it had split in half. And it turns out that was only just one minor reason for why the catches were inconsistent, but it definitely helped. So that's solid. And the whole catch sear assembly had a lot of weak points. It turns out that anytime you have any kind of play in this whole assembly of these pieces, you're going to run into problems. So we've got the Seers that hit the catches, right? And it's two separate pieces. And the issue that I had eventually ran into was that since these are just screwed together, right? You end up with one piece with the elastic put through this little hole here. Even screwed together super tightly, these could still twist just a little bit, and that kind of bending was creating a lot of inconsistency in the firing, up to a catastrophic failure that eventually happened, where both Seers on my Caliburn actually snapped in half. It turns out once these screws get a little loose and this can bend a certain way, it puts a lot of pressure right here at this screw point, and I don't know if you can see that this is cracked open, but you can definitely see on the other half where it had split directly in half right at the screw hole. These screws got just a little bit loose, and then this was kind of torquing to the side just a bit, and then suddenly the forces on this were way too much in a certain way that it just snapped the sear, and it tried to snap this one. There's a crack in it at the exact same point. And before it actually broke, it was doing the thing where I could not fire the blaster without double firing it. Like, there was just so much slop in these moving around weird that if I tried to fire either side, it would just end up firing both of them. The whole thing was very unreliable and just wouldn't work as intended. So the main thing I did to fix that was I reprinted them, obviously, and I solvent welded the two pieces together, which is a little tricky because you got to put the elastic in there first. You could probably use a different kind of method for the elastic where you can feed it through and knot it after these are glued so that it's not an issue, but I ended up putting the elastic in right before I glued them together, so it's kind of in there permanently, but that's not an issue. So what I ended up actually having to do, though, is solvent welding these two pieces together. So I screwed them together. Well, I put a little bit of solvent weld, you know, the side grip 3 that I had showed off in a previous video to weld PLA together. I put a little bit of that on the pieces and then screwed them together and let that dry, so that this is essentially one rigid solid piece. And doing that to both Seers completely solved the double firing problem. It is now extremely responsive and I can shoot either side whenever I want to, really easily. It doesn't have any weird inconsistency. It's completely made it much more reliable and just fixed that issue entirely. So the issue with double firing, using the new Seers that had the different catch face that I think I already showed that off in the first Caliburn video, and then gluing this to the Seer middle parts, that completely solved the double firing issue, which is great. The elastic, it is double strung. It's actually got 2 loops going through here. Helps the blaster actually catch correctly every time. Of course, it also has all the different changes that I mentioned in the original video. The O-rings on the plungers. The O-rings on the plungers are the same as usual. The O-rings on the actual pushers are a little thicker. They have a much stronger seal on them than the plunger ones do, because you don't need them to move super quickly. So getting a strong seal on there is a little more important. Well, it's more that since the pusher O-rings aren't being forced against a sealing face on the plunger when it rockets forward, you need them to be a little tighter to actually hold their seal when you're firing. Because with the same size O-ring as the plungers, they're just a little bit loose and air can leak when you're shooting. Not a lot, but it was enough to be noticeable. Up here, we have changed to how the priming handle is attached to these priming bars. And all I did was drill a new hole in the aluminum here and in the printed part and add a screw here, so that gets around the weirdness of this bar being a regular Caliburn size bar on a mega Caliburn, having the holes just kind of misaligned and forcing you to use this piece that kind of does this weird jank movement back where the holes are back here. I had originally decided I was going to just have to make my own custom bars and remodel this part so that the holes were forward, but then I came up with the simple idea of just like, oh, just drill a new hole in this one so that you have 2 solid connections on this, so I don't have to worry about this tiny 3D printed part that just snaps immediately. And having the 2 solid connections up here has improved the rigidity of the blaster when you're priming it. It feels a lot smoother now. It doesn't feel like you're bending the whole thing in a weird way every time you prime it, because it only had 1 actual connection point, since this had broken off here. And I solvent welded this back together, but this isn't really doing anything now that we have the 2 connection points up at the front. And this has improved the feel of the prime of the blaster a lot. It doesn't feel like you're gonna break it priming it anymore. Like it doesn't seem to flex all weird when you're priming it, which is a big improvement. Another small change, and this really needs to be something that's just included in the actual file itself, but I didn't feel like redesigning and reprinting this. So I carved these rectangular holes here in the tops of the whatever this piece is called, the main kind of housing, so that you can actually see into the magazine when you're priming the blaster. And that has helped me a ton, because the way the double mega burn is set up normally, there is no way to see whether you have ammo left or not when you're priming. So you'll be out of darts, you'll prime and dry fire twice, because there's nothing. Like, these 2 slots here are completely useless. I'm not sure why they're even there, because they just see right into the side of the lip of the magazine. You don't actually see where the darts are, or the pushers for that matter. All you see is a piece of magazine. So if these slots could be moved over just a bit so that you can see to the top of the dart, then you can, while you're priming it, you can actually see whether you have a dart left or not. And that has saved me countless times in actual Nerf wars, because I can tell if I've still got darts left or not, or what the situation with my ammo is a lot easier, without having to literally take my magazine out to look at it. So this was a really simple change that turned out to be incredibly helpful, and it's something that would be super easy to just change on the 3D model. You wouldn't want to do a very large channel here, just because then you would get rid of the roof of this part that holds the Mega Dart in the correct position to then be pushed into the barrel, and you'd get some weird feeding issues. But this kind of hole right here seems to be a perfect little window, so you can see down into the magazine when you're priming it, and it doesn't introduce a weird area for the Mega Dart to get caught on when you're trying to push them forward. So that seems to work fine. So aside from the changes to the catch and Seers assembly, the most important change I have done to this blaster is that I've modeled and painted my own pusher design that includes a slot for an O-ring. The pushers on a regular Mega Burn don't seal with a barrel at all, and you have a lot of air leakage, because when you're shooting these large ass darts, you really don't want any leaks or inconsistencies or anywhere you can lose power, because you're already kind of maxing out what this plunger size will do with this long ass barrel shooting a Mega Dart. And just having a decent seal between the pusher and the barrel like added 40 FPS to this thing. Even before I printed my own pushers, the stock pushers, or the regular pushers that you would print with a Caliburn, I had electrical tape around the front so that it would actually seal with the barrel, and that made a huge difference in performance by itself, but it was kind of unreliable, and eventually the electrical tape would kind of peel off, and it was just a mess. I then tried to take the metal pushers that I had bought a while ago and kind of machine a groove into them to accept an O-ring, but I don't have a functioning lathe, so I couldn't really make this super clean. I actually put this into a drill press and used a Dremel to do this, and it's just too sloped. The O-rings could easily just slide off of this, and I'd lose the O-ring. It would work really well for a couple shots, and then the O-ring would come off, so this clearly wasn't a good solution. And if I made the O-ring groove any deeper, I would just cut right through this thin metal pipe. So if you were to do something with metal, you'd need a lathe and a thicker piece of metal to work with, so you'd have to be starting from scratch there, so that didn't work. So what I eventually did was change the 3D model to make this a little thicker so that I wouldn't be worried about it snapping right at the O-ring groove, and add an actual O-ring groove for an O-ring. And that has completely solved the sealing issues, and my performance with this thing is a very consistent 140 FPS. It'll send a Mega Dart 100 feet no problem. It's fantastic. Let me just take a barrel off so you can see the pushers here. So if we remove a barrel, you can see here we have a O-ring on the end of the pushers that goes into the barrel about an inch, but it's definitely enough to seal really well. This is it's like a 3/4 by 9/16 inner diameter O-ring that just fits the slot that I put on the model. And you can see on the front of the pusher here, you might be able to see that it's a little thicker. I just decreased the inner diameter of this, and I probably overdid it just to make sure it was strong, and the reduced diameter of the pusher might be costing me in FPS just a little bit because the airflow is restricted. So there's some room for improvement in performance, but as far as reliability goes, just having this O-ring here has made a world of difference for shooting the Mega Darts at a decent FPS reliably. So that's the main change that this blaster has. And yeah, so you can just see we got double O-rings, and you can see the O-rings through the top here, which actually became a little bit important as I was messing with different pushers. I could tell, like on this metal pusher, I could see immediately that I had lost an O-ring when the blaster stopped firing correctly. So yeah, now that the pusher's correctly sealed, the catch assembly is rigid and working correctly, this thing is a monster. It'll send Mega Darts 140 to 150 FPS, just throwing them across the field, and it's using the AccuFake Megas. It is laser accurate. I have shot people right on the top of the head as they're hiding behind barricades more times than I can count. I caught somebody in the elbow. They were hiding behind a tree and the elbow was poking out, and I just shot them in the elbow from like 60 feet away, like it was nothing. The effectiveness of this thing on the field, having your crazy mega darts that are just laser accurate, and having that follow-up shot, being able to shoot and see that you've missed by just a bit and quickly adjust and fire the second shot without having to pump or lose your aim, or like keeping the exact same target acquisition and having your second follow-up shot just ready like that is so incredibly useful in the middle of a fight that I love it. It has quickly become my favorite homemade blaster that I've made, and now that it is working reliably, I bring it to every war I go to and just have a blast with it. It's fantastic. Obviously, it's kind of not great if all you've got is Centurion magazines or something. Having the Busby Tyrant mags, the big 13 round mega dart mags, which I have 7 of, which is easily enough for any standard like Nerf War round. Like, I usually go in with the 2 mags in the blaster and then 4 mags loaded up in a satchel kind of on my side, and I very rarely run out of ammo before the round's over, even when I'm kind of spamming at people, so it's kind of an ideal amount. Unfortunately, you just can't buy those magazines anymore. You gotta find them at thrift stores or on eBay or whatever. I'm glad I kind of, back when they were available, when you could just buy a Tyrant for $10 or $20, I was like, hey, that's cool. It's a mega magazine that is way better than anything Nerf makes. And I kind of knew that eventually I would have some sort of magazine-fed Mega Blaster, and I would want the higher capacity, so I just kind of stocked up on them. And now that I have this crazy monstrosity, I'm very glad I did, because those magazines are perfect for this. That's pretty much it. This blaster is fantastic now. I love it. It's one of my favorite things ever. I use it at every war I go to now, because it's just super fun, and sniping people with mega darts from across the field is super satisfying. You definitely know when you've been hit by this thing. It's got a serious thump to it. Whenever you go to a Nerf war with something like this, everyone's like, "Oh wow, that's a double mega Caliburn? Why would you make that?" And then you use it, and it's crazy. Now I'm just rambling. Yeah, there's the key kind of design changes. I'll go ahead and put this pusher model on Thingiverse and probably link it in the description, just so that anyone who has a mega Caliburn and wants to use that is welcome to. I think there is quite a lot of optimization that can be done to this piece, because this is the first pass on it. The inner diameter is probably necked down just a bit too much, and it's costing a bit of FPS drop just because it's restricting the airflow, so that could probably be improved. For right now, it's working really well. It's just keep in mind that it can definitely be improved further. And of course, these more positively engaging Seers on the plunger, those have been on Thingiverse since my first video, and I'll go ahead and link to those as well, just for anybody who happens to be making a double Caliburn and wants to do that. But yeah, that's it. I'll just do some firing demonstrations just to kind of complete the video and show off how much this thing has improved in reliability. And that should be it. Thanks so much for watching. This is my Chungus burn, my super crazy blaster that I am in love with, that needs a bit more lubricant. It's gotten all dirty from yesterday's war, and the seal on the plunger, the seal on the pusher with the barrel has gotten a little rough, but that's easily fixable just by cleaning it. Oh, and one other small change I forgot that really has no bearing on the performance of the blaster. I don't know if you can see in between this little slot here. If you have a spring that doesn't have flattened ends, like if it's rotated a certain way, the end of it will just poke out here and try to try to thread itself out of the blaster, which is kind of annoying. I'm not sure why this gap is here in the first place, but all I ended up doing was drilling a large hole in some bottle caps and just sticking those up against the spring, and they were the perfect size to act as a spring cap and keep the springs in place here. So that was just another minor change. It's mostly cosmetic, if nothing else, because the springs poking out like wasn't causing any problems. It was just weird, and yeah. So fix that with some super jank little bottle cap spring caps there. Oh, and there is one more thing I want to do to this blaster, and it is once again related to the pushers. The only problem that I've noticed while using this now in a Nerf Wars is how awkward it can be to reload. Just because, say you're at the end of a round, you've already primed the blaster, you've got 2 darts ready to go, right? And your magazines are empty or half empty and you want to top them off. There's no way to do that without firing the 2 blasters you've got chambered, because if you pull it back to remove the magazines, you cannot then put new magazines in and then push it forward without double loading both barrels. And additionally, like, one of the big benefits to a double magazine blaster like this is that in the middle of a fight you can kind of reload one side so that you end up having more darts in one side than the other, and once you run out of one side you're kind of alerted to the fact that you've run out of ammo on that side, but you've still got darts ready on this, like, so you can't get ambushed while you're reloading by staggering it. But there's no clean way to really do that without pulling the slide back to put a new magazine in on that one side. It's really awkward. So what would really make this blaster just perfect is if I could put the magazines in and out while the bolt is forward. And of course you can just do that by having a pusher that has a necked down outer diameter along the area where the magazine goes. And yeah, so I want to do that to the pusher, but I'm not sure if you can do that with a 3D printed pusher without it being too weak and just breaking on you. So I might have to custom make my own kind of aluminum pushers that then have the O-ring groove and then are necked down so that you can take the magazines and put them in and out of the blaster while the bolt's forward, which would really improve the usability of this whole thing in a Nerf War by a lot. The more I use this blaster, the more I really wish I could just take either magazine in or out whenever while I'm in the middle of a fight. That would make this thing much more formidable. So that is the only thing left to do to this blaster, is find out some way to get pushers in here that allow me to change mags without priming the blaster. Once I've done that, this thing will just be basically perfect. Like, I'm in love with this blaster. It's super fun. All it really needs is for reloads to be a little less awkward, and it will be just a crazy powerhouse in the field that I would be scared to go up against. At this point, I've used this Caliburn to great success at ADL, of all places, the Atomic Dart League, like the super competitive Nerf stuff where we're running at each other from behind barricades and everybody's using Lynxes and Caliburns and FDLs and super competitive crazy blasters. And I'm holding my own with this, if not dominating with it in certain rounds, where just having that sniper blaster that's real accurate, that has the second follow-up shot, like, people will rush for the flag and I'll just pow pow take out 2 of them before they can do anything about it, mostly because they're in flag running mode and they think they can just get past me without having to take me out. And I'm like, nope, that's just not going to happen. And it's just fantastic. But that's enough rambling. I'm just very happy with how it is now, with all the tweaks and changes. There's just a little bit more to do with figuring out how to get the magazines to be insertable when the bolt is forward. But aside from that, it's great. It's one of my favorite blasters. I look forward to using it at many more Nerf Wars to come. And the fact that if anything breaks, I can just replace it with my printer is kind of comforting. Alright, I've set up the cup table. Doing something a little bit different this time. I'm going to be standing about 30 feet away from it and seeing how easy it is to try to clear the table using the double mega burn from a little bit of a distance, just to test out kind of the accuracy. Got me 2 Tyrant magazines, hold 13 darts each, so I'm gonna just put all 26 darts into these cups, hopefully, and see what I can do. Shooting high a couple times. That's a bad dart. Let's try again. Oh, I had a dart try to fold itself. Okay. Oh. I sliced an O-ring. Whoops. That's what was happening. Shit. I had an O-ring break right off. I'm gonna replace that and try again. Alright, reset everything. Replaced the O-rings and re-lubed it. We got this little O-ring. It was fine all day yesterday. Snapped in half after a few shots today. So, let's try this again. Wow. Over and under. Oh, that was it. Only got a couple cups left. You can see if I hadn't missed those first few shots, I could have easily cleared the table. Let me grab a few more darts. Okay, switching over to some Centurion mags, just to limit the ammo a bit. The inferior Mega magazine, but let's see if I can hit these last like 5 cups. Wow. Well, that kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Can I hit the darts off the table? Nope. Way off. I got one. I just bounced those. And you can see in these top slots now that you're out of ammo. Instead of trying to rack it when it's empty and then dry firing it twice. So that's pretty cool. Alrighty. Okay, and one last thing. Just because it's hilarious, I've loaded up some regular Nerf Mega Darts into this thing. They're just the whistling ones. I want to see if you can actually see on camera just how wild they are when they fly. I've noticed the scars actually tighten the grouping quite a bit, so where they're more like a weird spiral instead of just flying in a random direction. They're still pretty inconsistent, as you would expect. Oh, there's a weird high-pitched whistle in that. Now, without the scars, I wouldn't be able to hit the dart catcher in the back there. But with the scars, I could at least consistently hit within that giant 4x4 foot square. Or maybe I can't. So yeah, and you get this weird, like, high-pitched, almost whistle. Like it's trying to whistle, but it's flying too fast for it to do its normal Mega Dart whistle. They do crazy corkscrews, and I wouldn't even be able to hit the back wall if the scars were taken off of this thing with regular Mega Darts. Yeah. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, this has been Carius reminding you to have fun. Alrighty, we got one last update. I went back into Fusion and modeled up some Vanguard Pushers for this thing, and they work great. I just slimmed down the pushers, and since they're so large already, they're actually pretty sturdy. It doesn't feel like they're going to break at all. The wall's about a 1/16 of an inch thick, I believe, and that was enough that it just feels like a pretty sturdy tube, and I've had no issues with it flexing or seeming like it's going to break. As soon as I took it off the print bed, I basically tried to break it with my hand, and it was like, oh, this is actually pretty solid. This might work. So, Vanguard Pushers, they work great. I can reload the blaster very easily whenever I want now. It's fantastic. And these are the files that I will be sure to include links to in the description to these Vanguard Pushers. And also, I added a second O-ring slot, and I've noticed this adds a little bit more consistency to the seal, and it's been working fantastically. I just got back from an ADL event, and it performed beautifully. Didn't really have any inconsistent shots. I had a few jams where darts tried to fold in half, but that was just because I was using worn out darts. The Vanguard Pushers with double O-rings are working fantastically. So, link in the description to that file. Anybody with a mega burn, doesn't even have to be a 2nd degree burn. The pushers for this are just mega burn pushers. So if you've got a mega burn and you want a Vanguard pusher, link in the description. Bye. Oh, and my friend Willie told me that there was some douche on Facebook, like, posting pictures of my double Caliburn and saying, hey, look, guys, I do cool mods. Come contact me for a commission. And, like, obviously the fact that he's calling a fully homemade blaster a mod means he doesn't know what he's talking about. But to have the balls to just steal pictures of something and say it's yours and try to scam money off of people. I'm really glad that Willie saw that and posted screenshots of my posts about this blaster and said, this isn't yours. What the fuck is wrong with you? I'm glad that he caught that. And the dude, of course, deleted all his posts and kind of disappeared after that once he got caught in a lie. But just wanted to take the opportunity to say fuck you, whoever you are. And I'm glad you got your shit kicked in by one of my friends looking out for me. So thank you, Willie. And yeah.